Chronic stress has been a major driver of many diseases.
How do you mitigate the stress? Yoga, breathing, meditation, or practices to help create a silent stillness. What's really nice about Ayurveda is you have a whole entire branch of Ayurveda called Rasayana, which is literally the focus and study of longevity and rejuvenation.
Why Ayurveda's core philosophy on digestion is so strong that when our gut health is good, our overall health and longevity is exceeding.
You're going to see it. Your body's going to be looking for ways, alternative ways to get the trash out if your lymph is congested, which tracks back to how well is your upper digestion.
Yes. The bacteria on our plants that's grown naturally, that's very beneficial for our gut, for our internal organs. But today, we wash everything. We sanitize everything.
In 2007, there was the Microbiome Project. In that, they gave us 2 warnings. And the first warning was stop washing and sterilizing everything. And the second warning was
Hi, Dr. John. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to dive into your journey, explore how Ayurveda meets modern science, and share some practical tools for our listeners so that they can use them to cultivate vitality, resilience, and longevity in their own lives. So welcome to our show. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's start with talking about Ayurveda in general, longevity, and daily routine. So as someone who values both tradition and scientific evidence, I'm personally fascinated by how Ayurveda, often called the original science of life, approaches longevity and healthy aging. Modern research nowadays is confirming that prevention, daily routines, mind-body balance, all of these can really extend our health span and not just our lifespan, right? So how would you describe Ayurveda, its philosophy of longevity from Western medicine, and what key principles can we adapt in our modern day to age with vitality in the trigone of physically, mentally, and spiritually?
You know, I always think of Ayurveda as the original longevity science, right? And we have a lot of, biohacking going on today where we take a little snippet of Ayurvedic medicine, circadian medicine, circadian rhythms. The understanding was understood thousands of years ago. In fact, the original Ayurvedic physicians were really engaged in an in-depth study of nature. And by understanding the natural cycles of nature and the rhythms of nature, you get to live a really healthy life. And most of the stress that we see that causes what I call unnecessary aging factors has to do with us living against the grain of Mother Nature. How many people do we see actually wake up for the sunrise? How many people are there for the sunrise? Well, in Ayurveda, that was a standard practice. You would wake up before the sunrise, and when the sunrise would come, you would honor it, meditate during it. And now we have all the science showing that during those morning hours, you get an exclusive amount of red and infrared light that activate your mitochondria to give you energy for day, repair for the day, and support the ability to naturally produce more melatonin at night. So it's crazy. You can get your morning sun and activate energy for the day, repair for the day, protect you from UV radiation in the middle of the day, but also get more melatonin at night as well, which gives you the deeper sleep just by we being there for the sunrise. And now we have that being understood, in kind of the longevity biohacking world. But this was, Ayurvedic 101, where they did Surya Namaskar, the sun salutation during the sunrise, where they meditated during the sunrise, where they did an Agnihotra, which is literally looking at a orange or a yellow flame at the sunrise, which only enhances the biological clocks of nighttime turning off and biological clocks of the daytime turning on. It's just such a beautiful understanding that they had thousands of years ago, which if it didn't work, it wouldn't still be in practice today in Ayurveda. And that's the beauty of Ayurveda. So, that's one thing. We also have the microbiome, which we only discovered really back in the early 2000s. And, you can look in the Rig Veda, which is one of the oldest Vedic texts, and they talk about something called krimi, which was the invisible or visible bacteria or little microbes, they call them, and how they understood that they were not to be destroyed. They knew that they could be healthy or unhealthy, but they didn't say kill them. They said basically change the host, change the environment. And that's something that we now have an understanding of, is the only beginning to have an understanding. Stop using antibiotics, start healing the environment, change the environment, and that will actually take care of everything. But these were like prophetic understandings that are only just being understood today. So what I write about in my website, lifespot.com, is I write about all the ancient wisdom medical practices of Ayurveda, and I try to find the science to prove them. Now, not every practice in Ayurveda thousands of years ago is still applicable today, but there are still, I thought when I first started writing articles and putting them out years ago that I'd have 5 or 10 maybe articles max, Now we have over 1,500 articles, all ancient wisdom with the citations of modern science to back them up. And I believe that if you have something that's been around for thousands of years, still around today, and you have modern science to back it up, it's something we should at least look at, because science really can prove whatever it wants. Coffee can be good or coffee can be bad. And there's science on both sides of that. Soy is good, soy is bad. Dairy is good, dairy is bad. I mean, you could just name it and kind of cherry pick studies to prove your point or your belief. However, when you have something that's been around for so long and has science, I really feel like we can put a little more weight on that boat, because otherwise you really just don't know. And that's the problem with Western medicine. That's the problem with modern biohacking, because a lot of it's some snippets of ancient wisdom, but a lot of it is, really new, exotic therapies that we don't really have any time-tested wisdom for. Not to say that they can't work. They may, in fact, work. But what's really nice about Ayurveda is you have a whole entire branch of Ayurveda called Rasayana, which is literally the focus and study of longevity and rejuvenation. And the word rasa means fluid or lymph. And the study of rasa is the study of longevity. So the study of the lymph, which really is how the body gets rid of trash, how the body carries immunity, and how the body delivers energy, to baseline energy, to every cell of the body through the delivery of properly broken down fat. That's the job of the rasa. That's the job of the lymph. And that in Ayurveda is the study of longevity. So basically when you think about it logically, if your body can't take the trash out through its lymphatic system, which Western medicine, well, I could say Western science knows a ton about it. There's study after study buried, lost in the journals. But in medical practice, it's basically non-existent. And Ayurveda had a whole understanding of how to apply that understanding of lymphatic drainage, how well the body can carry the immunity, how well the body can get rid of its trash. Basically, if your body can't take the trash out, if your drains are clogged in your bathtub, you can't use the faucets. You have to take care of how the body gets rid of its trash. Otherwise, we're going to break down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely want to go in depth about the lymphatic system, because I think, especially when it comes to health and wellness, we are on these trends, right? There's a phase where we only talk about gut health. There's a phase where we only talk about, we single out the way we, view our health. So before we talk about the lymphatic system, I have one question that on the krimi that you mentioned. In one of your YouTube episodes, you talk about how the bacteria on our plants that's grown naturally, that's very beneficial for our gut, for our internal organs. But today we wash everything, we sanitize everything. We almost, to the extent where everything is approached from an everything should be like antibacterial. And we're trying to clean it to the extent that we almost use chemicals, right? If you think about it, we wash our produce with baking soda vinegar. That is a natural approach. But then we also have these other agents for washing produce. So what's your stance on krimi? Like, how do you approach that to make ourselves feel we're consuming food that's beneficial, but at the same time, what's the perspective we're supposed to have on the bacteria that's on it?
In 2007, there was the Microbiome Project that was released. And in that, they gave us 2 warnings. And the first warning was exactly what you said: stop washing and sterilizing everything. There was a study more recently done at Stanford where they took the poo from mummies that were in museums in both Utah and Arizona, and they measured the microbial diversity in those mummies. And they compared it to modern humans. And there was such a lack of diversity in the modern humans' microbiome that they literally called it an extinction event, right? So the first warning in the 2007 microbiome project was stop sterilizing, stop washing everything, eat more dirt kind of thing, get more exposed to the bacteria because they're really important. And the second warning was the one I thought was most profound, which was that they actually talked about what's called the horizontal transfer of genetic material. Like my wife and I have 6 children, right? So we've passed on our genes, for good or for bad, to our children. It's vertical. It's a vertical transfer. Mm-hmm. There's also a horizontal transfer. We don't do that as humans, but bacteria, microbes do. So they studied that when you have a virus that goes into your gut and it doesn't have the genetic material to penetrate the lining of your gut and infect you, it can borrow the genetic material to do that from other bacteria that are already in your gut. It's called the horizontal transfer or borrowing of that genetic material. And so that's not good, right? Because that's how these viruses figure out a way to get inside of us.
Right.
And they actually just said that it basically there's 2 very important pieces: that the vast majority of that horizontal transfer of genetic material comes from exposure to farm animals, like when you're, like the bird flu is what we're having now. And the second thing is that it wasn't based on proximity, like bacteria and the virus happened to just bump up next to each other. It wasn't based on that at all. It was based on ecology. It was based on the environment of the gut. And that's where Ayurveda is so far advanced. When I first got into health, when I was back in, I started doing fasting with Paul Bragg and other ones when I was about 18 years old, and got into health early on and started getting into colon cleansing and klimas and colonics. And I don't know if folks know this guy, but his name was Dr. Bernard Jensen, who was he's written over 50 books. He's discovered iridology. He was a colon cleansing expert. And so I followed him early on in my career. And I ended up, when I was a little bit older, this is still like 30 years ago, got to lecture with him. I was able to be on a panel with him and discuss health and so on. And when I met him, I was super fascinated to meet him. And he had gone to Pakistan and worked with what's that tribe in Pakistan? The ancient tribe, the longevity tribe. There's a tribe there. I forget the name of it. And he worked with them. So I brought him some Ganges water from the source of the Ganges, and I was really happy to meet him. But when I looked at him, his belly was distended way out to here. And he had cured himself of cancer a handful of times, but I was like, why did he get cancer? I mean, I understand that can happen to anybody, but many times. And his assistant told me he takes 17 digestive enzymes before every meal. I was like, wow, this is not what I expected from this guy who was like the epitome of health and written so many books about natural medicine. I mean, really, and the books are still appropriate today. And his whole thing was klimas and colonics, cleaning out the intestinal tract. And when I went to India in 1986 and ended up living there for a year and a half, I realized that in Ayurveda, they didn't hose your intestinal tract down with water. They use oils to lubricate and heal and restore an unctuous oil-based environment in the gut versus a water-based environment in the gut. Because when you irrigate, you just wash out all the bacteria, you change the environment, you change the ecology. But when you do, oil, like do enemas with oil and herbs mixed with oil, and everything they did with the intestinal tract was so delicate. There was no like anticidal agents, bactericidal agents. We're just going there and clobbering it and then killing everything and making you better for a spell. There was an understanding of how to restore the environment, let the good bugs, creamy bacteria fight the bad ones, and let the ecology run the show. And that's what the 2007 Microbiome Project told us. But no one listened to that. We still sterilize everything, and we still have no idea about intestinal ecology. And that's what we do in Ayurveda, is we really focus on that, and a reboot of digestive strength and a healing and a repair of the intestinal lining and the environment and the microbiome, as opposed to getting rid of the bad guys.
Wow, that's amazing. I guess my perspective on maybe why we're overly obsessed with cleaning and sterilizing is we're surrounded by toxins from everywhere, right? From pesticides, herbicides, to the products that we use for cosmetic purposes, like our body washes, hand soaps, even our skincare products, especially from food, environment, even stress. And I think all of that can accumulate and very subtly impact our health. And both science and Ayurveda support doing regular gentle detoxification, like you talk about, for optimal liver, lymphatic, and gut function. What I'm personally fascinated by is the way that you prioritize the lymphatic system. So for our audience, can you describe what is the lymphatic system and how Ayurvedic detox techniques such as breathwork that you recommend, nasya therapy, and even seasonal cleanses, like how do they work? What are some simple habits we can adopt to support our lymphatic health and longevity?
Yeah, wow, this is great. I love talking about this, and I'm rarely asked about this because most people don't even know anything
Yes.
about the lymphatic system. So first of all, it's the largest circulatory system of your body. In Ayurveda, don't forget, it is the longevity system. It is the one, it's rasayana. Rasa means lymph, so it's a study of that whole system. We study the blood. We measure the blood. Is it cholesterol high or low, blood sugar high or low? That's the nutrition coming in. But the lymph is the trash coming out. Now, if you have a logjam in getting rid of the trash, how you think the blood's going to look over time? It's going to have an impact on that. So that's why you have to deal with the drainage system first. Now, it's
Hmm.
carrying your immune system, delivering properly broken down fat at every cell of your body, and it's delivering, and it's also, of course, taking the trash out. So your lymphatic system starts in your digestive system. It starts inside of your intestinal tract. It's that the food bolus, when you digest your food and that food goes through your intestinal tract. That's called the ahara rasa, the food lymph connection. That's what that means. So that's where it starts. Now, if you don't break down those foods as well as you should, and I'm going to quote a journal study right now. If you don't break down the protein and the fats completely, like people can't eat wheat, they can't eat dairy, they can't eat nuts, they can't eat seeds, they can't eat lectins, they can't eat oxalates, they can't eat. They bubble wrap their diet because we're told don't eat all these foods, which is not a great idea because your digestive strength, your ability to digest those harder to digest foods, is directly linked to your ability to detoxify. We have the ability to break down glyphosate, not in massive quantities. We have the ability to break down heavy metals, of course, not in massive quantities, but we have a digestive detoxification system. But if you don't break down the food the way you should, particularly the proteins and the fats, and remember, the 70 million tons of environmental pollutants that are dumped in the atmosphere, according to the EPA, every year, they filter down on the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water we drink. They have to be properly broken down and detoxified, and
Right.
they're fat soluble. So the study shows that if you don't break down your fat and your protein well, they'll go incompletely digested into your intestinal tract. They won't nourish you because they didn't get broken down properly. They'll go uptaken into the garbage can, which we all wish was the toilet, but it's not. It's the collecting ducts of your lymphatic system called the lacteals inside your intestinal tract. And they're going to suck up all the trash. And that's going to send it through a lymphatic system, through lymphatic lymph nodes where all the white blood cells, and they're going to purify all this stuff, make sure that there's no bacteria or processing. That's really the body's garbage can, because it's always trying to spare stuff. It doesn't want to just throw good stuff away. It wants to make sure we take it through a system, clean it out, take the good, get rid of the bad. That's what your body, the kidneys do a similar version of that. So if you don't break down those foods the way you should, and you bubble wrap your diet, you can't eat the wheat, you can't eat the dairy, you can't eat the nuts, seeds, lectins, beans, nightshades, oxalates, all that stuff. They're going to go into your lymphatic system, according to the study. And they're going
Wow.
to congest your lymph. extra weight around your belly and hips, compromising your gut immunity, which is 70% of your immune response. It can push into other aspects of your lymph because your lymph is systemic. It can go into the skin-associated lymph, giving you rashes and hives and, poor complexion, things like that. It can go into the respiratory lymph and compromise your respiratory immunity, which is directly linked to gut immunity. They're bidirectional. And it can also go into the brain lymph and lymphatic systems, which dump 3 pounds of trash out of your head every year while you sleep. So if you track all those problems back up to the source, you're looking at a weakened digestive system. Yes, we have an environment that's toxic, but it's your digestive system that protects you from that toxic environment. And if the brain lymphatic system gets congested, and you mentioned nausea, which is a sniffing of Ayurvedic or medicated oils into the sagittal sinus to create a dumping and detoxification of the brain's lymph and lymphatic system, and your brain dumps 3 pounds of trash out of your head every year while you sleep per year. And if you're not dumping that well, then of course, studies now show, and they only discovered the lymph and lymphatic system of the brain about 17 years ago at the University of Virginia. And since then, they've linked it to anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, inflammation, infection, sleep issues, and autoimmune concerns. So if the master computer can't get its trash out, it's not going to know how many fire trucks to send to the immune event down on Main Street somewhere. It might send too little or too many immune responders or fire trucks, and that can create an overzealous immune reaction or an autoimmune concern or an underperforming immune reaction. And that's why the brain, lymph, and lymphatic systems are so critically important. Now, in Ayurveda, they talked about the brain, lymph, and lymphatic system thousands of years ago. They called it tarpaka, which are the detoxification of the brain lymphatic system. And they also talk about as a storage site for old memories, like a species survival memory. Like if you went into a cave when you were 10 and a bear chased you out, you're never going to forget that. So that's what we hold on to memories. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they were served us at one point in our life, but sometimes we hold on to those patterns of behavior. So they developed therapies to clean out the brain lymphatic called nausea. And we have an article about how to do that. And you can learn more about that. Just type in nausea, Nasya, at lifespot.com, and you'll read a whole article about that. But the pump, as you mentioned, the pump for this brain lymphatic and lymphatic system and the pump for the entire lymphatic system is your diaphragm, which is your major breathing muscle. And in a study with elite athletes recently, 2 years ago, 91% of them did not have a diaphragm relaxing and contracting fully. So this is a muscle, one of the bigger muscles in your body. And you can't put a barbell on it and pump iron with it. The only way you're going to get that to contract is to get the rib cage to become more elastic and strengthen your breathing patterns by using specific breathing exercises to get that diaphragm working. So that's such a critical piece of the puzzle. And there's intimate relationship between your diaphragmatic function and your digestion. There's about 15 studies buried in the medical journals that if you have heartburn, GERD, reflux, or indigestion, you can literally breathe away your heartburn and reboot digestive strength just by practicing diaphragmatic strengthening exercises, which nobody really talks about. And even in Ayurveda, with pranayama techniques, oftentimes they're designed more for the spiritual aspect, which is great. But if the rib cage has become cage-like, then you really need to, that's where the yoga comes in, creating the elasticity in combination with the breathing to set the stage for the benefits, the spiritual higher brainwave patterning and functioning of the brain during breathing practices. But the rib cage has to be an elastic system versus a rib cage caging in your system. So that's what I talk and write about a lot, is how to do these breathing techniques and how to reboot your digestion and how to reboot your diaphragmatic function and rib cage elasticity. Because without that, if that diaphragm is not working, digestion is not going to work. You're going to get lymphatic congestion in your whole body, brain lymphatic congestion, poor immunity, poor digestion. You're going to swell, hold on to, water on your rings getting tight in your fingers, skin associated lymph and dumping ground, brain lymph becoming a dumping ground, creating migraine headaches. you're going to see it. Your body's going to be looking for ways, alternative ways to get the trash out if your lymph is congested, which tracks back to how well is your upper digestion. What foods do you have to take out of your diet? Which foods don't you tolerate? And if that's an issue, we need to reboot that strength. Because when you're 18, you could digest all that stuff. But now, wheat's bad, corn's bad, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. Not that you should, those foods are even fried food, you should be able to eat fried food. I mean, you don't want to eat that, but you should be able to eat anything, you know what I mean? And be okay. And if you can't, that's a red flag. That's a canary in the coal mine saying, hey, you know what? You can take the food out of your diet, but you didn't fix anything. If your digestion is weakened, that means your detoxification is weakened, which means toxins are going to go now, not only just undigested wheat or dairy getting into your lymph, now you have literally toxins and heavy metals getting into your lymph, and they find their way into the brain chemistry, which is hard science, and that creates accelerated cognitive decline as you age. So it's the beauty of Ayurveda is all connected. You can't separate pieces out, like you said.
Wow, that's awesome. When I was at the California College of Ayurveda, we were taught how much about how our body, whatever food we eat, it's not about what we eat, but it's about what we digest. And if we're not digesting it, then it's just pro-inflammation, basically. And emerging science highlights that too, that the gut microbiome is essential to immunity, mental health, and chronic disease prevention, pretty much. And I'm just fascinated by how Ayurveda has always placed digestion at the core of health. But there's so many variations and perspectives of what is right when it comes to gut health. Like you said, is gluten good? Is wheat good? Is it bad? Is coffee bad? But science also shows that our microbiome basically changes with the seasons. And Ayurveda talks about this beautifully and how adapting to the available foods based on season can be very beneficial. So additionally, we have some people restricting foods like gluten. So why do you think gut health is so foundational? And what are some practical steps, both ancient and modern, that we can take to support our digestion, gut microbiome, diversity, and even the gut-skin connection that you talk about?
Yeah. My first book called Body, Mind, and Sport was one of the first books that cited research on nose breathing versus mouth breathing during exercise. Yes. And I've trained a lot of athletes with nose breathing and all that over the years. The second book I wrote was called The 3-Season Diet, which was a book about eating seasonally. And in Ayurveda, there is a little bit of a myth. A lot of people think, I should eat according to my body type. And only if I'm on this body type, eat this food. If I'm that body type, eat that food, which isn't really practical in reality because we all have evolved to live off the land and eat in a seasonal way. You can emphasize certain foods based on your constitution, but the first rule of thumb is that we should eat the foods in season. Studies show, like you said, that the soil microbes change from season to season. When they did studies with the hunter-gatherer tribes, the Hadza tribe, they found that their gut bugs would change from season to season, from a higher carbohydrate gobbling up or digesting microbiome called bacteroidetes for carbohydrates at the end of the summer when all the fruits and grains are being harvested and starches are being harvested. Studies show even to this day, we have more amylase, the enzyme for digesting starch at the end of the summer than we do in the spring when there is no pasta or pizza being harvested. As we're doing this now in the spring, it's a low carb to no carb time of the year. And you have a different stable of bugs in your gut at this time, according to the hunter-gatherer tribes, which are more actinobacteria that are designed to give you fuel from fat and fiber and more protein. So we are circadian beings and we need to eat like them and live like them. So the idea was that we should eat in a seasonal way. And the reason why I call it the 3-season versus the 4-season diet was because there are 3 main harvests. There's a spring harvest. We all know it's not a lot. It's an austere time of harvest, kind of harvest. We have a summer harvest, which is more robust, more carbohydrate in nature. And we have a fall harvest, which is loaded with everything. Then that gives you fuel for the winter. And of course, we have in the fall, we have lots of fruits and vegetables and things like that. But we also have the nuts and the grains and the legumes and things that will store and help carry you into the winter months. So there's 3 harvests, therefore 3 seasons that we actually interact with nature. Nature takes 1 season off and takes a rest, goes on vacation. We all need a little break. So nature is based on cycles of rest and activity of day and night. We have winter and summer. They're all cycles of rest and activity. So we have to respect that. And nature does that as well. Where you live, if you look closely, you'll see those cycles of rest and activity. So the idea is that we should eat according to that. My 3-season diet book is you would take a spring. Here you can print this out for free on my website at lifespy.com. And this is a grocery list for all the foods that are harvested in the spring. So all you would do to make it simple is you would look at this grocery list and circle the foods on this list that you like and give yourself permission to eat more of those foods during this season. There's a summer list and a kind of fall/winter list as well. Wow. So you have 3 grocery lists, and you don't have to only eat food in the season. You just need to make sure you're getting more of those foods in that season. And if you look at this list, there's ones with asterisks, which are the superfoods for the season. And then there's the kind of more generic ones. A lot of the foods are cross over 2 seasons. So there's always a primary and a secondary season for all the foods. And that's how you would use this list. And then you start to understand that when you eat the foods in the springtime, which we're in now, if you look at what's happening in nature in the spring, is that the deer are going into your lawn or your garden and digging up dandelion roots and leaving big holes in your lawn or whatever. And those bitter roots, the dandelion, the ginger, the turmeric, the Oregon grape, the golden seal, all those roots are actually burdock root. They're cleaning the villi. They're alkaloid in nature, astringent in nature, bitter in nature, going to clean all the holiday food from all the winter heavier foods that are stuck in your gut, making you extra weight around your belly, and it's going to clean all that out. The next thing that comes out of the ground, in addition to the fact that it's austere and all the religions do their fasting in the spring, so it's a naturally occurring calorie-restricted time of the year to force the body into fat burning. Even if there was a ketogenic time of the year, it would be the spring. And then, of course, the next thing that comes out of the ground are those early spring greens, that fluorescent green that comes in. That's a different color of green than the summer green, which is just dark green. This is that light, bright, chlorophyll-rich green that when you eat those foods, sometimes they have 200 to 300 times the nutritional value than the actual full-grown plant. And you eat those, and now you're inoculating your gut with the environment, the ecology, to heal the gut. First, you clean it out. Nature had that as plan A, step 1. Step 2, fertilize it with all these spring greens that are rich in chlorophyll. And then step 3, or the more of the leafy greens start to come out, which are lymphatic movers. The berries, the strawberries start to become harvested. And next thing you know, you're actually starting, and those are all, anything that's like a blueberry or blackberry or a raspberry that would dye your shirt in a different color, red, blue, green, black, whatever, is going to be a lymphatic mover. All the antioxidants work through your lymphatic system. They scrub through your lymphatic system. That's hard science as well. And but nobody really talks about that, but there's really good science to support that. So then you have this lymphatic cleaning that cleans out. So you have now the inside of your gut lining, all the little villi are cleaned out. The lacteals, the lymphatic collecting ducts, are inside those villi. So they're all cleaned out. You fertilize that with a really nice layer of chlorophyll to basically create an environment for the good bugs to proliferate. And as you're eating those spring greens, you're getting a whole new inoculation of the right bugs for the right season. And the bugs in the spring are going to help decongest you from the rainy, muddy allergy season of spring. The bugs that will change as we eat more summer foods are going to decongest or going to dissipate heat for you, help you handle the heat of the summer better. And the bugs that you get in the fall for winter eating are going to boost your immunity. And these are called bacterial endophytes. This is why it's important when you take food or your herbal medicines, you don't just go for the herbal extract that is 1,000 or 100 times more potent. You want to get something that has the whole plant in it. Because when you take ashwagandha is an example. It's been talked about on the web that it causes liver toxicity and people shouldn't eat it. Well, what they're actually studying is the extracted version of that plant. They take just a couple of the withanolides out of the ashwagandha plant and they soak it in alcohol, they clean it out, extract it, and they give it as a sterile agent. And that is going to be a concentrated, extract that's sterile, doesn't have the microbiome, which is part of the intelligence of the plant, which is going to inoculate the intelligence of your gut microbiome for that season. So that's gone. And you have just one or two or three constituents of the entire plant. Like in turmeric, curcumin is one of 300 constituents. So they're just giving you one of them. And that's going to have a medicinal effect for you. It's going to actually act as a medicine, but it isn't going to go without consequences. Studies show that low turmeric can actually boost stem cells, but curcumin at higher doses can block stem cell activation. And I've written articles and articles about the science about why if you're going to use an extract, it's great. If you're wanting to cure breast cancer or colon cancer, curcumin is amazing. There's good science behind it, but it's going, like any drug that you take, it's going to have an effect, a side effect that's altered, that's different than the intention of the whole plant. So when you actually use the whole plant with its natural microbiome and all the constituents together, you have something that's working with your body's intelligence, encouraging your body to do the job, where an herbal extract is sort of doing it for you in a natural way. And it's fine. I use them, but I don't use them forever. I get them on, get better, get off. But the herbs, you can take them forever because they're whole foods, they're plants, they're foods. They've been used as foods, as cooking and diets around the world for thousands upon millions of years, really. So that's the beauty of Ayurveda, is that they understood, don't be messing with nature. Don't try to make it better. Don't try to make it more potent. Let's try to understand that the more subtle things are, like the invisible microbiome on the foods you're eating, how powerful they are. And if we sterilize it, which they do in so many of the medicines today, you lose the herbal intelligence. Like if I took all the bugs out of your gut, you'd be a completely different person. That's why it's so important when we're using medicines, we want to restore microbial diversity, like that Stanford study I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's an extinction event that's called that, our lack of diversity. You just take sterile things that are going to sterilize you even more. Over the long haul can be a bad idea. For the short term, for sure, they can be powerfully medicine to bring the body back into balance, and then use whole herbs to finish the job.
Yeah. And is that why Ayurveda's, core philosophy on digestion is so strong, that when our gut health is good, our overall health and longevity and vitality is exceeding? So in regards to gut health, why do we restrict certain foods like gluten?
It's not uncommon, when you eat something and you feel bad, you're going to just blame the food. So you just say, I don't feel good eating this, so I stop eating it. And the problem is that list just continues to grow. You end up with getting off of the wheat and then getting off of the dairy. When I got into practice in 1984, I was always from the very get-go, a very nutritional practitioner. So we would take people off of wheat, we'd take people off of dairy. We'd give them probiotics. Even back in 1984, we had probiotics back then. And that all works. They'd feel better taking the wheat and dairy out of their diet. And they would eat the probiotics and they'd feel better. They take the digestive enzymes, they'd feel better. But then in short order, the problems would come back. And then they would have to take something else out of the diet. And they had to take more digestive enzymes. Like I said, that doctor was taking 17 enzymes per day, right? So it never really solved the problem. And it became very clear to me early on in my practice that I wasn't really fixing anything by just giving him more digestive enzymes and more probiotics, which, basically most of the probiotics on the market are what are called transient. They go right through you. They work, but you got to keep taking them forever and ever and ever to continue to get the benefit. They don't become permanent, which I thought was just crazy. Now I'm just selling probiotics for the rest of their life and my life. And so I told my suppliers that I didn't want to use any of those probiotics But if you could find me studies to show that these kind of probiotics would adhere to the gut and become permanent, then I'm in. And over years, they started developing what are called colonizing or finding bugs that were colonizers, which would actually stick to the gut lining and increase the proliferation of your own permanent bugs. And that's what I use today as a way to reset the microbiome. And we use soluble fibers to heal the lining of the intestinal tract. We use Ayurvedic herbs to reboot the upper digestive system. So you have a kind of rebooted system, so you don't have to, then you can start to add the wheat back and be okay with it, or the dairy back and be okay with it, or the oxalates back, and, or whatever food it is that's bothering you. Can't eat beans, can't eat. And nowadays, I have people who, when you think about the world that we live in, rice and beans has been a staple for pretty much the entire planet for thousands upon thousands of years. And now I have so many people who can't eat rice or beans anymore,
It causes bloating and gas and
right. So when I was in that practice, when I first started in 1984, everybody could eat rice and beans. That was, beans might give you a little gas, but it wasn't like it was like it was just you're going to fart a little more with you eat some beans, but that's normal.
Right.
Gas is part of what bugs make gas, and you pass that gas. That's normal behavior. Stinky, not smelling good, that's a different animal. But the idea is that we should be able to do that, and people could. But now all of a sudden, I have people who can't even eat, rice or beans. Or in Ayurveda, there's something called khichdi, which is they would hand dehusk the beans, hand dehusk the rice, cook it with spices for 3 hours. They give it to babies as their first food. Anybody who was sick, they would eat that and only that. And now we have people who can't even digest the medicinal food. That's how far out of whack we've become. And do you think that inability to digest a wide variety of foods, like rice and beans, so simple, has anything to do with the robust nature or the lack of robustness of our gut immunity and our poor response to things like COVID? Because the gut environment, gut microbiome, is directly related to the respiratory microbiome. So those immune systems are bidirectional. So if you have poor gut health, can't eat X, Y, or Z that we talked about, then you're going to have respiratory immunity compromise as well. So again, you can't separate out these systems. They're all connected. But their digestion in Ayurveda is always step one. 85% of all disease comes from digestion. So we run a fine-tooth comb through digestion. We have something called the Digestive Health Quiz, free on my website, lifespa.com. You just take the quiz and ask questions about your stomach and your liver and your gallbladder and pancreas and duodenum and large intestine, small intestine, lymph. And you can kind of find out where your digestive system might be broken down, and then use herbs and foods to fix it.
So for those who think that their digestion or gut health or their lymphatic system isn't supporting their best, what can we do to restore that?
Well, I would say there's the one thing that we don't do in America, which is such a big piece of Ayurvedic medicine and Ayurvedic cooking, is spices. Spices are so powerful. And the 5 spices that I would tell everybody to start with are ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. We have a formula called Gentle Digest because it reboosts every aspect of your digestion in a gentle way. And it's ginger, cumin, coriander, fennel, and cardamom. You can make them your own blend and sprinkle it on your food when you're cooking it, sprinkle it on your food when you're eating it, or take a capsule, whatever. But studies show that when you actually spice your food, not only does it reboot stomach acid, bioflow, pancreatic enzymes, duodenal enzymes, and the quality integrity of your intestinal lining and lymphatic drainage off your gut in a healthy way. Studies also show it protects the food from cooking damage. You may have heard that when you cook meat, you have what are called heterocyclic amines, which are cancer-causing. When you kind of charcoal your meat or charboil your meat, there's studies that show that when you make toast, you heat your starches and they become brown. That's called acrylamides, and they're also called cancer-causing. There's also what are called reactive oxygen species. When you cook anything, it creates more free radical damage. Well, studies show when you put spices on it, it actually protects those foods from that free radical damage, cancer-causing agents that are on pretty much all the food that we eat. Now, obviously, a little bit we can handle it because we have good digestion, but the spicing not only make the food taste good, it created better digestion function, helped to heal and restore a healthy microbiome because it creates an environment that's different, but it also protected the food from the cooking damage. And of course, in Ayurveda, the cooking was always done very slowly over time, not a real flash cooking or flash burning. Like we we blast our milk with 212 degrees, boom, the flash pasteurization and kill everything. That's just not how anybody could have ever done it historically, because cooking, the flames weren't as hot as we just don't have. They didn't have they little tiny flames that they'd cook on. It wasn't like, and they would cook beans over hours and hours that would sit there for the whole day, and that kind of a thing. And of course, these days, people don't have the time to cook and so on, so we just cook everything really fast and eat it really fast, and that's not a good look.
Yeah, absolutely. And today in our generation now, we see a lot of immune related conditions, diabetes, high cholesterol. All of these conditions are rising pretty rapidly around the world, actually. And research points to a combination of factors behind this trend, including lifestyle changes, diet, environmental exposures, and especially stress, chronic stress. And all of these combined can definitely disturb and disrupt our metabolism, digestion, and immune balance that we talked about. And I think it can also cause some deficiencies as well. Ayurveda and modern science both highlight the central role of digestion, metabolism, and daily habits in preventing these diseases. And some evidence even suggests that with the right interventions, it's possible to even reverse and better manage them. So my question is, Dr. John, why do you think we're seeing such a dramatic increase in these chronic conditions today? And maybe what are some effective steps we can take to not only avoid developing these diseases, but also support the healing process?
Well, there's no question that when we spray pesticides on our food, those are killing the microbes. So we're eating food that are sterile. And those pesticides that we eat, we consume, also kill the bugs in our mouth and kill the bugs in our digestive system, which have been studied to actually make the enzymes to help you cook the wheat and the dairy and the nuts and the seeds and the grains. So by eating all these processed, highly sprayed foods, we're literally killing our ability to digest them, which is why organic food, the very best you can, growing it in your own garden, the very best you can, is such a healthier way to go, the best you can, because of that. Of course, the other piece of the puzzle are when you eat a lot of foods that are highly processed foods are the ones that never go bad. They were made so they could stay on a shelf forever. And they do that by bleaching and boiling, deodorizing the fatty acids, the oils the seed oils in those foods. Like if you put a loaf of bread and you put oil in that loaf of bread, the bread never gets hard. Now, when I grew up, there was bakeries on every little village, and that bread would go bad in a day. Normal for bread to get hard in a day or two. And unfortunately, now we put oil in it and it never goes bad. Why? Because when you put oil in that bread, the microbes on the counter, which would make the bread go bad, they don't want to eat that oil because they know it's just,
Right.
they don't recognize it as anything they would want to eat. So when you eat that food and put it in your gut, your microbes would normally eat oil, good quality oil. They have nothing. They don't even know what it is. So where do all the toxins, the bad oils go when your body can't digest them? To your liver. And it creates bile sludge over time, poor liver gallbladder function. And the number one abdominal surgery today in America is take your gallbladder out. And that's one of the reasons why. So when you have compromised liver function, you're going to have compromised upper digestive function because your stomach makes acid, and the bile made in your liver, which is now congested, is a buffer for that acid. It also emulsifies all the fat. So if you don't have good fat emulsification for the environmental pollutants and the toxins, and you don't have good buffers for the stomach acid, well, your stomach's not going to make the acid, which is going to make you unable to digest wheat and dairy and nuts and seeds and beans and all the protein-esque kind of foods. And it's also not going to give you the bile flow to emulsify the fats. So the environmental pollutants go basically untouched into your intestinal tract, and that goes into the lymph So the lymph tries to process it, but oftentimes ends up storing it in your tissues, your fat, or even in your brain. And over time, that will catch up to us.
Wow. So again, you're basically re-emphasizing how gut health is pretty much the core and essence of our overall health.
Right.
So modern day is definitely catching up to what Ayurveda has long taught us. Our mental and emotional health is very much connected to our physical well-being, and gut health. So in our modern day, Dr. John, stress is something we almost cannot escape in our fast-paced lives. I think chronic stress has been a major driver of many diseases. And science now validates the gut brain axis as well. And it is key to emotional resilience. We hear and read about practices like mindfulness, breath work that you just talked about, and understanding our mind body type. And all of these, we can work towards addressing the root causes of anxiety, depression, and stress. So, in your practice, how do you, Ayurvedically speaking, how does Ayurvedic psychology approach mental health differently? And how can we work more towards our inner work?
I wrote an article recently about a couple of articles on metabolic syndrome, which is really the epidemic of our time. It's high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high, LDL cholesterol, high triglycerides, and extra weight around your belly or your organs. And that's the cause of most of what accelerates aging and causes problems, right? And there are herbs for every one of those conditions, and you can support them. But I have so many patients now who are healthy, eat really healthy, really pristine diet, organic food, no processed food, doing everything right, exercising, and they still go to the doctor, and the doctor wants to put them on a statin. And I was like, got so frustrated by this. So I wrote an article citing, just like what you said, the connection between stress impacting insulin resistance and blood sugar, and how stress directly impacts cholesterol, how stress directly impacts extra weight around your belly. So if they're responding to life like a bear's chasing you up a tree because it's a survival stress, you're going to need more sugar in your bloodstream to get up that tree, right? So that's going to why your blood sugar rises. Chronic levels of stress, that underlying rev, that under kind of constant go, 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 constant sensory input and incoming all the time creates a level of stress. Even though it's not bear chasing you stress, it's a underlying chronic stress that never goes away compared to our ancestors who lived in the forest. You go for a walk, in the wilderness, and it's like super peaceful. And the deer are super, and once in a while, you have to run away from something, but then they're peaceful again. So it's nature. The nature of nature was silent, and the nature of our culture is anything but. We looked at cholesterol. To make stress-fighting hormones, you need more cholesterol. So the body puts more cholesterol in the blood when you're under a lot of stress. When the body's under a lot of stress, it takes any reserve extra fuel. It's going to want to make you eat more too, because you want to feed the body to help mitigate the stress. But it's also going to take any extra fuel and put it under the mattress as fat reserve, and that's going to create extra weight gain. So when you look at the studies and go, well, what do we could do about the stress component? And studies show that if you meditate, and there's just study after study after study about this, it'll actually lower your cholesterol, it'll lower your blood pressure, get rid of abdominal obesity, and eradicate metabolic syndrome. So when you really look at what we're looking at is, there's things for your digestion and your lymph and all these things. But if you go all the way upstream, which is what Ayurveda sets out to do, you're looking at Ayurvedic psychology. How do you mitigate the stress? Yoga, breathing, meditation, or practices to help create a silent stillness. Meditation was more of a biohack for the crazy culture we live in. You think about
Yes.
thousands of years ago, the hunter-gatherers lived in this total resonance in nature. They could persistence hunt and intuit where the hunting would be good and where it would be bad, and they could track animals even 10 miles away. They had incredible ability as humans to perceive things that the animals seem to have a sense of or awareness of. We had that same ability. But then when civilization started cropping up and people were in the cities and hustle and bustle, and the smart people that came in, maybe the priests or the seers or the doctors, whoever, they were aware of the fact that this is a completely different vibe than out there in the wilderness. So they created a
Yeah.
biohack called meditation, where I could actually meditate, kind of similar to the kind of vibe I had in my cave. These seers would go into the caves and meditate, and then they would go into the cities and see, man, this is crazy. So they went back to the cave, right, to get that silence. So meditation was more of a biohack to give us the ability to restore that silence, that non-bear chasing up a tree, constant stress in your life that causes metabolic syndrome, and give you the ability to reset that calm and not be running that constant stress that creates a constant, drive to deal with that stress, which we now call metabolic syndrome. That's really what's happening. So that's why what Ayurveda is so beautiful, because it takes advantage of, you know, all the way up to the very upstream cause. And it even goes further than that. It goes into old emotional traumas, patterns of behavior you created as a young child that may still be you might still be projecting those on the screen as an adult. And how do we eradicate those patterns of behavior? And that's where that nausea therapy, the brain lymphatic cleansing comes in, and meditation comes in, yoga comes in, breathing techniques come in to actually flush the brain lymphatic system so you can get rid of old emotional trauma as well. So they understood, in a profound way, how to, get us back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can you elaborate on nausea therapy?
So I had a patient of mine, she came into my office and she had a goiter in her neck about the size of a grapefruit. You couldn't miss it. And she had hyperthyroidism, and the doctor wanted to irradiate her thyroid. She didn't want to do that. So we worked with her doctor, and this is back, I did for 26 years, administered Ayurvedic retreat detoxification programs called Panchakarma. So we gave her Panchakarma, and my favorite therapy was this nausea therapy where you clean out the brain lymphatic. It kind of starts with a vigorous head massage, and then a eucalyptus steam to open everything up, and then hot water bottles to vasodilate the head. Then you lie over a table and you sniff these medicated oils up into the sagittal sinus and through here. And then you sniff some ginger drops, just a whole procedure. And on my website, there's an article and a video that tells you step by step how to do it even at home. And anyway, after her third treatment, she was writing in her journal, and she said, I had this epiphany where I was abused when I was 14 years old. And she said, what was weird about this is I hadn't thought about that event in decades, but I was not struck by the event itself as I'm kind of visualizing this whole thing happening. I was totally taken by my life before the event. I was a happy-go-lucky child. And then my life after the event, I became a hyper-vigilant 90-hour-a-week corporate executive, stressed out, perfect color-coded closet. Anybody would come to my house, I'd clean for 3 hours to make it perfect dress, perfect nails. Everything she did for her survival was to be perfect. And she had burned out her adrenals, her blood sugar, and now her thyroid was exploding. And she said, I looked at my life before the event, this happy-go-lucky kid. I looked at that event, and I looked at my life after. She said, it wasn't great, but it wasn't worth 25 years of my life. So she said, I just dropped it because I wanted that life, my original life, back. So I was able to just let it go because I saw the consequence, and the consequence wasn't worth stressing out of the event. She just dropped it. And her thyroid goiter was gone in a week of Panchakarma. I swear to God, that was the absolute truth. And her numbers came down 200 points during that week. And after about 9 months, her thyroid completely normalized 100%. And then I saw her like 5 or 6 years later at a Christmas party in Denver, and she came running up to me. She saw me, and she had 2 little children with her that she was desperate for me to meet because she wanted to let me know that these children wouldn't have happened if, she went down the road of being this hyper vigilant 9-hour-a-week corporate executive
Yeah.
engaged in survival practices based on old emotional trauma. And that's the beauty of Ayurveda, is they had literally therapies to kind of help us get above and beyond those traumas. Because it's this crazy brain of ours that makes us do the same dumb stuff again and again and again. And Ayurveda was all about us becoming conscious, being aware of, okay, those patterns of behavior created a personality. I became a pleaser. I became this. I needed to do that as a kid. But now as an adult, are they still serving me? Are those patterns of behavior serving me to this day? And if not, yoga, breathing, meditation, nasya, all these therapies will give you a level of self-awareness where you can see, you know what? I see that that pattern of behavior helped me when I was a child, but I also see now it's not. So you're actually able to let it go. And that's the beauty of Ayurvedic psychology, is it actually works on the physiology's ability to let go of these memories as opposed to being dragged through the emotional mud of trying to get to a place of feeling resolved.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And Dr. John, I just have three last questions. Two specifically on routines and immune, and then last one is a rapid fire. So you speak a lot about bone health and how certain deficiencies impact our bone health. And while that has a potential to impact our immune and overall health, can you talk about the importance of bone health and its role in our general overall health?
Well, bone health is a modern concern. It's not, and ancient folks didn't have it. And the ancient folks were outside all day long. They got the infrared light in the morning, they got the UV light in the middle of the day, and they got infrared light in the afternoon to repair any damage that the UV light created. That creates melatonin that brings the body back into rhythm. Biological clocks for a day turn on, nighttime turn on and off all at the right times. So there's a big piece of that puzzle. Also, being sedentary is a new concept. Sitting in chairs, sitting in cars, sitting on couches
Right.
is a new concept. So that has a role to play in it. And then, of course, nutritional deficiencies. We have minerals that we don't get from our soils because they're depleted. We don't get vitamin D from the sun anymore, which is directly linked to bone health. Our ancestors ate dairy products, and they were fermented dairy products. And that fermented dairy provided vitamin K2, which takes the calcium in your blood and puts it into your bones as opposed to your heart. And studies show that most Americans are 90 plus deficient in this vitamin K2, which makes sure that the calcium goes to the right place. So there's so many factors that overlay on bone health, and then stress being another one. And that's why it's so important.
So, what are some habits and strategies, dietary wise, or whatever it is, that you recommend to supporting better bone health?
Well, definitely seasonal eating. Nutritional cycle is an annual one. There's no like RDA, get everything every day, because nature didn't provide everything every day. There's grains and fruits and things, more starches in the fall. There's going to be more protein and fat during the winter and early spring. There's going to be calorie restriction to detoxify in the later spring. There's going to be carbohydrates in the summertime. So seasonal eating is critical. And then eating, meals properly in terms of the daily Ayurvedic clocks, eating a breakfast big enough to get you to lunch, a bigger and more relaxed lunch, and then a lighter supper, which comes from the word supplemental or soup. So front load the food. Don't eat all the food at night. Have your breakfast and lunch as your main meals, and then a smaller supper. Do those things, eat seasonally, meditate, get breathing practices. And I've got so many breathing articles on my website. Two that I would recommend first people go look at. One are the best diaphragmatic exercise article, and also something called lateral or horizontal breathing to really get the rib cage to get opened up again. And there's yoga in there as well. That can be very helpful.
I'll find all those links and put them in the show notes.
Okay,
And so,
cool.
from my experience and how, basically based on our conversation, our morning and evening routines and habits really set the tone for our energy, mood, and even immune function. And we just talked about how aligning our routines with the circadian rhythm, like waking up with the sun and winding down with the sun, can really boost our vitality, sleep, and resilience. So, Dr. John, what are your top Ayurvedic and science-backed morning and evening practices?
Um, I think it's very important to wake up early before the sun. And I try to, because not everybody can do this, but I try to meditate, in front of the sun in the morning. Particularly this time of the year is a great time because the sun is getting up early. And for me in my house, I can see the sunrise. Where in the winter it's sort of like on the other side of our house and it's blocked and I can't. So the sun moves so dramatically. So this is and it's nice for us because it's warmer, so we can sit outside and meditate in front of the sun. I love that. And then I'll get engaged in some yoga and some breathing practices and also some exercise. I usually work out for about a half an hour with weights, and then do some yoga and some breathing practices as well. And that's important. And then I'll have a breakfast to kind of kickstart my metabolism somewhere between, 2-ish hours after I wake up. That kickstarts metabolism. Then I try to make a big meal happen in the early to mid afternoon. And that's the biggest meal of the day. And then supper is usually very small. Sometimes don't even eat supper. I try to generally eat 2 meals a day. But sometimes I'll have I'll have a little something in the evening, depending on the day, if I had a lot of activity, whatever. But I think those are the key things, is just in terms of eating.
Yeah.
Don't eat too much. As we get older, we tend to continue to eat like you're an 18-year-old with a super high metabolism. You want to start increasing maybe more protein, but definitely start eating a little bit. Give your body a little bit more time to digest the meals, because as you get older, your metabolism will slow down a little bit, and you need to adjust for that.
Right. And from your practice and your patients that you have seen over the years, um, considering the modern day fast paced lives that we live in today, what are some daily habits and changes that someone could incorporate to better their health and vitality?
We didn't talk about sleep, but sleep is really critical. I would suggest the other piece of the puzzle is, winding down in the evening, earlier rather than later. Getting to bed, definitely sleep before 10 o'clock at night would be ideal. And watching a little TV is fine, but, shut it down early so you have time to get into bed. We have like the lights that we have in our bedroom are red lights. So I'll turn the red light on. I'll even read with some red light. Then I'll close the book and go to bed, or I'll sit up and meditate before I go to bed. But I think that's really good. Just to recognize that sleep might be the most important time of your day for, compromising unnecessary aging factors. And if you don't do that well, you'll pay a price in the long term.
Absolutely. So, Dr. John, with that, do you have any closing words that you'd like for our audience to hear?
Um, I think that the big takeaway here is that we live in a culture which is really fast paced, and there's so much stress. And we don't think of it as stress. We think of it, I just got to go do this. I got to do this. And all that I got to do is creating a baseline level of stress that your body never gets a break from. And if you think about when you're like on vacation, I don't think vacation is going to be really stressful, but if you go on vacation and you're hiking or just being in nature, not like hiking to climb a mountain and accomplish something, but just, forest bathing-esque, where you're walking through the forest and being mindful and training with the rhythm and sitting on a rock and meditating, and, do things during your day that can actually reset the calm. I have an article on the website called the 1 Minute Meditation, where it's 30 seconds of breathing, 30 seconds of being still. And it's good science. It shows it flips the brain into a gamma state, which is a higher state of consciousness, and spits the body into about 10 minutes of parasympathetic dominance, which rejuvenates and rebuilds and turns off all the alarm bells. My first book was Nose Breathing Exercise, about how that changed the brainwave pattern. During a vigorous stress of exercise, the brain was responding to that stress as a meditative calm. So when you go exercise or when you're walking, just breathe deeply in and deeply out through your nose, and learn how to become a nose breather, because that tells your nervous system the war is over. If you see a bear in the woods, you don't take a big nose breath. You take a mouth breath. So that tells your nervous system the war is over. And that's what we need to keep reminding the body, hey, it's okay to be calm here. I can do all this stuff, but I don't have to be in this rev. It's not like I want you to sit in the cave and meditate and do nothing. I call it the eye of the storm. The bigger the eye, the bigger the calm, the more powerful the winds, the more productive you are. So that's the beauty of this body. If you've established that inner experience of composure and calm, that gives you way more productivity than, just being in the calm and staying and never trying to engage. You have to engage, but it's a law of opposites. It's called the coexistence of opposites: silence and dynamic activity. The sun is silently sitting up there, planets spinning around it, nuclei have electrons spinning around it.
Right.
Hurricanes have wind spinning around it. We also have a lot of activity that can we can live in the winds of the storm, which is dangerous, or we can hail from the calm. And when you do that, you're bulletproof, weatherproof.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. I learned a wealth of information from you today. So, Dr. John, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, the stories, the actionable insights, everything. I know our listeners are walking away with not only a deeper understanding of Ayurveda, but the science behind it and some practical tools they can really start using right away, whether it's syncing their routines with nature, supporting their gut health, or simply breathing more mindfully. So for everyone tuning in, I really encourage you to explore Dr. John's books, resources, and lifespa.com. Everything will be linked in the show notes for more guidance on your wellness journey. Remember, small changes, daily changes can lead to big transformations over time. So, Dr. John, thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.